I was a avid StarCraft player, wasting so many hours, on my PCs. I think I had to get a Pentium upgrade for it too, as I recall, back in the late 90s or whenever it was. So it did sort of jump out at me when there was this story that kind of made waves in the tech space that Microsoft was going to be buying Activision Blizzard in a historic $70 billion deal or thereabouts. It's not just StarCraft. There's a whole bunch of high-profile titles that actually mean a lot to a lot of gamers, etc. That's now going to come under the Microsoft brand, and we might go into some of the spin-offs coverage of what all this means. But for me, like, my takeaways were this was like super interesting because I know how I've always had StarCraft installed just for the hell of it because I kind of like to have a look at it every now and then just for the fun of it, and I know what the interface is and all that. But this kind of acquisition kind of gives you the feeling that what is it going to be rolled into Xbox in a big way? Is it going to just become exclusive to Xbox, even though they're claiming that that's not going to happen? They're not going to tamper with how it's being delivered for the time being, and how it kind of plays off in the game industry in particular. Like, you could tell that Microsoft's looking for a way to boost their gaming division, if nothing else. And before we get into the whole metaverse crap part of it, it is a big deal, and it's actually probably good for them. It probably catapults them up the line in terms of having a place in the industry, because despite, I guess, the name brand recognition of Xbox, it hasn't really been as big as probably what they would have hoped.
Yeah, it's a really interesting deal for me in a lot of ways. I think it's no different to the sort of deals we've seen in on-demand content, that you would see with Netflix, Disney, Paramount, etc., etc., etc. And this is Microsoft making a play for some very valuable games. And it's a very lucrative market, as we know, and you can see by the price they paid for Activision it is. So, yeah, I guess that's the real value to Microsoft. It's another revenue stream, and in an area that's going to grow, and obviously there's a synergy with Xbox.
I think the other thing that's interesting too, you mentioned the whole subscription angle, is that I guess games historically are a one-off purchase fee. It's, again, this whole sort of subscriptionifying the whole thing, where the content is not something you buy anymore. It's something that you just subscribe to, and then you can just stream it to your laptop. They'll probably end up streaming it, not just having it stored locally, I'm sure, at some point. And this is another example where you just buy an Xbox subscription, and you've got access to everything.
And it always gives Microsoft the option down the track to make their games, Activision games, exclusive to the Xbox platform or the Xbox subscription.
Yeah, and that's going to be the interesting thing, because although I've never played Call of Duty, I understand it's a massive game, and it has a huge presence on the PlayStation. They were at great lengths this week to say, look, no, we're still committing to the PlayStation and that game's presence on that platform. But you're right, they could do anything at any time to pull the pin on that.
Well, that's right, but I think you've hit on a really good one. If they can move to a subscription model, then you get everything all in one on Xbox, and you still get Call of Duty on your PlayStation, but you'll have to pay extra every time.
Absolutely. So, I guess the other angle I wanted to cover with this, the game part of it, and the fact that it'll probably boost Microsoft's, overall viability across, not that they weren't viable before, but, kind of makes them a bigger player overall, is the whole coverage of this story, which, as we were talking about before we got on, has just been plain weird. And because, the metaverse is the latest buzz term in the tech space, after Facebook announced it. It's like they're fishing for the next big thing, and it just seems to me like outside of maybe a Ready Player One type metaverse that's gaming specific, the whole connection to the metaverse topic to me seemed like a bit of a stretch. Like, where are they going with this? Why does it always have to be filtered through the lens of the metaverse? Why can't it just be they're setting up a gaming subscription service and that's it?
Look, the only explanation I've got, Ben, and it's by no means correct, it's just an explanation, would be, I guess if on-demand video was the big thing 10 years ago, well, now the metaverse. And so you claim games are metaverse, which are they? Well, they obviously always were, because your games always occur in an electronic space that doesn't exist in the real world. So they've always been metaverse. So maybe it's just a renaming of games to metaverse content, and that, lets the dollars from Wall Street flow. That's the only explanation I've got.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because, there's a lot of in-app purchase type stuff that happens too, which is quite lucrative and has been built into the overall business model over time. So, if I go back to my example from before, StarCraft from the 90s kind of thing, I'd buy the first version and then I might buy an expansion pack. And I think that was the extent of the purchasing. Like, it was just 2 purchases and then it was done. But now it's kind of been taken to the nth degree. And if you're a real avid gamer and really into something like this, then you'd be a good revenue generator for a company like this.
Well, I think the thing is that you'll see, now there'll be an even greater meshing of games, content, video, and experience that may expand beyond the immediate game itself, and that's what the term metaverse is, and obviously new financial opportunities for whoever owns the content on top of that.
And not to say that I'm going to turn into like a full-on gamer anytime soon, but I have to say that part of the reason I sort of lost interest in it over time was just the fact that these games are expensive. So you would think that if you spent money on them, you'd want to spend quite a bit of time in it to get your value. And I've obviously been a lot more interested in watching films and TV and stuff like that. But having said that, if they roll it up into a subscription service and make it even easier than before to make it put it on your machine, it doesn't cost a lot. Maybe it's only $15 a month. Then all of a sudden, it's something you might just try for a little while, and you might get into it.
That's it. That's a subscription model, and I think that we're going to see more and more of that. Because it rolls into your big tech companies' plans, and it sort of is the new business model.
Absolutely. The one last thing I wanted to mention before we move on to is that this might potentially lead into other acquisitions too. I saw there was a bit of buzz around, Electronic Arts. What will Sony buy them as not in retaliation, but in response, just to solidify, that part of it. Could lead to a couple of things like that happening as well, potentially.
Oh, absolutely. And it's funny, you talk about these games back in the 90s, but I was playing both Electronic Arts and Activision back in the 80s when they started. And the games are a far cry, and the market is a far cry from what it was then. Times definitely have changed.
And the other thing too I should also mention is this whole rise of esports where, people pay to watch other people play games, which is something that just blows my mind in general, but yeah. I guess that's a thing.
Well, it is a thing, and I think that's also another metaverse experience, which we probably haven't quite cottoned onto yet, but I'm sure there are some people with new ideas who are thinking that that's a future way to go.